The strength of Notre Dame's class of 2025 right now is on the defense, and it's a big reason why the class is ranked number 1 in the country. But if Notre Dame wants to stay at the top on signing day, they're going to have to prioritize these positions the rest of the way. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Thursday, January 18th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And before we get going here, please take a moment to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening to the podcast. Please rate the show 5 stars and subscribe if you have not already. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So today's episode is part 2 of a 2-part series I'm doing here where I go over the biggest needs left on the board for Notre Dame based on position as they continue to build their class of 2025. The recruiting coverage started earlier this week when I had Locked On recruiting insider Brian Smith on the show, and that's when we really first started to do a deep dive into that class. It continued yesterday when I went over the biggest needs on the offensive side of the ball, and then I'm going to continue that today, focusing on the defense. So basically what I'm looking at here is who Notre Dame has currently committed, who they added in the class of 2024, and what the depth chart looks like right now, and I'll explain why I have this position so high. It's going to have stuff to do with the nature of the position, who Notre Dame has on the depth chart, all of those things. I took it all into account here, and then I created a list of what I believe Notre Dame should prioritize the most the rest of the way. Because even though Notre Dame has 14 commits right now, there's still almost a full year until signing day. So Notre Dame has a lot of work left to do, even though they're a little bit ahead of everyone else in the country. So at number 1 here, for my biggest need for Notre Dame in this class, it's defensive end. Now, that might be a little bit of a surprise to people because right now Notre Dame actually has 3 defensive end commits in the class. They've got 4-star Christopher Burgess Jr. He committed just last week. They added 4-star CJ May not that long ago, although he's listed on the listed as an athlete on most of the recruiting sites. Notre Dame projects him to be a defensive end, and then they also have Joseph Reif, who's a 3-star, but also Notre Dame likes to play at the defensive end position. But if you just look at defensive end in college football and really any level of college football right now, outside of quarterback and left tackle, I think defensive end is the most important position on the field. And you need an elite defensive line as a whole if you want to compete for the national championship. It's not a coincidence that the teams with the best defensive line in college football year in and year out are usually at the top when it's all said and done. Look at what Michigan did this year. Their defensive line is a huge reason why they won the national championship. I believe that Michigan's defensive line was the best in the country, and they gave Alabama hell. That's why they had 5 sacks, or maybe it was 6 sacks on Jalen Milroe in the first half. Either way, it was a lot, and they didn't even blitz that much. They were just running a bunch of stunts, and Jalen Milroe and that Alabama offensive line could not figure it out, and it was a big problem for that Alabama offense. And then when you're able to get pressure on the quarterback like that, you're going to have a lot of success on defense. And in order to get that pressure, you need elite defensive line play. Now, Notre Dame added some really talented players at the position in the class of 2024. Bryce Young is the star of that group. He's a high 4-star. He was the number 107 player nationally. They also added 4-star Logan Thomas out of St. Ed's High School in Ohio. They're a high school powerhouse, not just in Ohio, but really throughout the rest of the country. And Logan Thomas is a special, special prospect. He is a pure Viper, maybe the only pure Viper out of any of the 3, because Notre Dame also added Cole Mullins, who, unfortunately for him, he suffered a pretty serious injury right before the start of his senior year. So he's a little bit lower on the recruiting rankings, but I think he's a pretty underrated prospect and could do a lot of really good things once he gets on campus at Notre Dame. So the good thing is Notre Dame has been building at that position. Obviously, it would have been great to get Keon Keeley, but it didn't happen. He ended up going to Alabama, and Notre Dame was still able to get a pretty solid class at the defensive line, and in particular at defensive end. So a couple prospects to watch. The main one is 4-star Damian Shanklin. He's the number 15 edge rusher in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, and he is actually going to be on campus this weekend for Junior Day. I think he might even be on commit watch, and if Notre Dame is able to land him, and they get Shanklin to go along with Burgess Jr., CJ May, and Joseph Reif, That's a really good class, especially at that position. It's a position of need. Notre Dame is going to lose most likely everyone on their defensive line after this season because it's a very senior-led group. And while that's great for this season, I'm really excited about what Jordan Botelho, Riley Mills, Howard Cross, and RJ Oben are going to be able to do for the Irish this fall. After the season, they're going to have to reload at the position, and a great way to do that is by adding a bunch of young talent there through high school recruiting. And right now, Notre Dame is a really good start, but they really need to land Damian Shanklin if they want to solidify that position. All right, coming up at number 2, I've got safety. Now, Notre Dame has 4-star Ivan Taylor already committed, and he's a stud. He's the number 6 safety in the class, top 60 player nationally, and they just added 4-star Ethan Long as well out of Connecticut, who's a little bit lower ranked, but still a pretty talented prospect. The reason I have them at number 2 here is, despite the fact that they already have 2 commits, is Notre Dame has just not recruited safety well for the past, 7 years, basically. They were just whiffing at the position for several cycles. And then last year, they were able to add Tay Johnson, who's a 4-star athlete, and then 3 stars Tabron Benny Powell and 3-star Kennedy Urlacher. I'm going to be honest, I did not like that haul. Outside of Tay Johnson, I just didn't really like Tabron Benny Powell and Kennedy Urlacher as takes that early. Now, I could be proven wrong, no doubt. I actually think Kennedy Urlacher is more suited to play linebacker, not necessarily middle linebacker like his dad, but still, I just thought that it was a big position of need for the class last year, and the guys that they brought in, it was a little bit underwhelming. Now, I think Tay Johnson is a freak athlete. He could be really, really good at the next level, but we're going to have to wait and see because it's not a position that's easy to learn. Fortunately for Notre Dame, they had Xavier Watts turn into one of the greatest developmental stories of all time as he switched from wide receiver to rover to safety, back to wide receiver, and then back to safety again, and he's turned into one of the best defensive players in the country. That doesn't happen that often. Notre Dame should not count on that being the norm going forward. I don't think they are. I think they're recruiting this position really aggressively in the cycle, and that's a big reason why. They already have 2 guys committed. There's another prospect to watch, though, 4-star Jaden Blair. He's the number 14 safety in the class on the 24/7 Sports Composite. And if they were able to get that commitment from Blair, and then they had Ivan Taylor, Ethan Long, and then Jaden Blair as 3 guys that could all play safety, I feel better about that position. I think Aiden Schuler and Ben Minnick, they could be pretty good at Notre Dame. I think the staff is a little bit higher on Adon Schuler. He got some action in that Sun Bowl. It wasn't great. As a matter of fact, Oregon State was kind of targeting him and picking on him a little bit, but I'm not going to hold that against him because it was really his first significant game action at the college level, and I don't think that's that's indicative of what his career is going to be at Notre Dame. But the problem is, Notre Dame has just not had that many difference makers at the position, especially since Kyle Hamilton left. Ivan Taylor is actually the highest ranked safety commit at Notre Dame since Kyle Hamilton, so that's obviously a great sign. But when they missed out on Peyton Bowen, man, that really stung. And for as dramatic as that entire recruitment process was, it was still a big, big loss for Notre Dame. And Peyton Bowen, if you watched Oklahoma at all this year, you saw him making plays as a true freshman, both on defense and on special teams. He was a force, created several turnovers. And if Notre Dame is able to add a guy like that and have him actually sign on the dotted line come signing day, that'd be great for this class. I don't think that Jaden Blair or Ethan Long are anything close to that level, but that doesn't mean they can't eventually develop into really good college safeties. I think Ivan Taylor has the best chance. His dad, Ike, played for the Steelers for, I think it was 13 seasons. It felt like 30 because I was a Browns fan, and obviously the Steelers dominated the Browns for much of my life. So watching him was not that fun, but I'm very excited about the fact that his son is now going to play for Notre Dame. And I think the ceiling for him is really, really high. And then having Long and hopefully adding Jaden Blair, if they're able to do that, those are some nice pieces that will probably take a little bit more time. But I think that that would be a really solid group, but they really need to add Jaden Blair. They can't afford to just have 2 safety commits in this class because who knows what's going to happen with Kennedy Urlacher. He could move positions, and that could be another down cycle for Notre Dame at safety, and they just can't afford to keep that up much longer. Okay, we have a lot more to get to, and coming up next, we'll take another look at the defensive line and the interior of that defense. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Today's episode is also sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why they've created tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Speaking from my own experience, I know that whenever we're looking to make a hire, we use LinkedIn to help find the perfect new team member, and it's so easy because they do the heavy lifting. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They've got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is pretty easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why owners rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. We all know hiring can be time-consuming, but adding the right team member can be invaluable to your business, and it's crucial to achieving your goals in 2024. LinkedIn also knows that small business owners are wearing so many hats, and they might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We continue with my list of Notre Dame's biggest needs on defense in the class of 2025. And number 3, I've got defensive tackle for a lot of the same reasons that I have defensive end at number 1. The only difference is Notre Dame has a lot of young, inexperienced players at defensive tackle already on the roster. But that doesn't mean that Notre Dame couldn't seriously benefit from having a true game wrecker in the middle, because having one of those guys or two of those guys, it just allows you to do so much. You can shut down the run game by just blowing up the interior, and you can pressure the quarterback from the middle, which then just doesn't really give the quarterback a lot of room to run. If they go right, if they go left, if they're getting pressured up the middle, it's a lot harder to make plays. Notre Dame has some guys right now on the depth chart that I think could play a lot and contribute a lot once Howard Cross and Riley Mills move on after this season. Very happy that those guys did that, because I think that is going to be the strength of the team. You can make a real argument that Cross and Mills make for one of the best, if not the best, defensive tackle tandems in all of college football. But what's behind them? So we know that Notre Dame has Jase Medical, who's a veteran on the team now, and they've got Gabriel Rubio, who's getting older as well. But behind those guys, there's a bunch of inexperienced guys who, frankly, we aren't always sure what their position is at Notre Dame. Now, I'm sure the coaching staff has an idea of what they would like to be, but still, I think they're figuring that out. You've got guys like Donovan Heinisch, Devin Houston, Brendan Vernon could even play some defensive tackle, even though most people projected him to play strong side end. And then you got Armel Mukum. And what's Tyson Ford doing? Because he was a big commit out of high school, but he just has not really been a contributor at all since he got on campus at Notre Dame. So I don't really know what to expect from him the rest of the way. Right now, Notre Dame has 3-star Davian Dixon committed at the defensive tackle position, and in the class before, Notre Dame only had one true defensive tackle prospect commit in 3-star Sean Civillano Jr. When Sean Civillano Jr. committed, a lot of people were like, wait, what is Notre Dame doing? Because I don't even think he was in the top 900 players in the country. And it's honestly insane that these recruiting sites even rank more than 900 players, but he wasn't even in the top 900. Now, he did finish, number 514, so it got better, and I think that the staff is a lot higher on him than the recruiting rankings might suggest, but still, he's not like a Lewis Nix type or someone like or Howard Cross even. Now, Riley Mills, at one point, he was an end, and then he moved inside because that was more suited to him in college. But still, Notre Dame lacks a difference maker at the middle. I don't know how many guys they're going to take this class. I think if they were to add another defensive tackle, they'd probably just need one more, given all the guys who I just mentioned who are in front of them. Even though Notre Dame only added one guy in the class last year, it doesn't look like they're pursuing this position all that heavily in this cycle, because I think they feel pretty good about the guys in front of them, and they don't want to overload. Notre Dame also could move some of those defensive ends inside. I think that that sort of happens once guys get on campus. They see how their bodies develop in a college weight program. They see if they're fast enough to play on the outside at the college level. And if they're not, if they're more suited to play inside, then they do that. But it's easier for an end to move inside than it is for a tackle to move outside. So it makes sense why Notre Dame would add more defensive ends than tackles, knowing that they could potentially move those guys inside later on. But right now, the only true defensive tackle, like the guy who is no doubt going to play up in the middle, is Davian Dixon. And at the at signing day, that might be the only guy there. But I think Notre Dame should prioritize this position, and I think they should get at least one more. They're not going to get a guy like Justin Scott, who they were in the running for a long time last season. There was a point in time where I think even he thought he was going to commit to Notre Dame. Then he decided to wait once he got an offer from Georgia. He committed to Ohio State, and then at the 11th hour, he flipped his commitment from Ohio State to Miami. And then when Hayes Fawcett made the graphic for him, Hayes Fawcett is I think he's like 18 years old, and he's a graphic designer who works for On3, and he seems to make every single commit for every high school prospect and every single transfer portal. He makes the graphic, and I will never forget seeing Justin Scott's in a bag of money was on his, and I was like, okay. Well, at least he's being upfront about what his priorities were, and I think that's a big reason why Notre Dame wasn't able to land him. It sucks. In the end, it probably makes sense that Notre Dame wasn't going to get him, given what his priorities were, but still, it stings because Notre Dame needs guys like Justin Scott in the middle of their defense because they just don't really grow on trees, to say the least. All right, moving on to number 4. I've got linebacker. And I think Notre Dame needs to add at least 1 or 2 more linebackers in this class. Right now, they already have 2 linebacker commits, although you could make the case that maybe it's just 1 because 3-star Dominic Hulak is he's like a hybrid. He could play outside linebacker. He could play on the edge. Notre Dame, especially recently, has moved guys from linebacker to Viper, including Junior Tuialamaka and Josh Burnham, although Josh Burnham might be a strong side end now as opposed to Viper, but Notre Dame is not afraid to move move a linebacker down to the defensive line, and that could be the case with Dominic Hulak. Notre Dame did add Ko'o Kia. He's a true linebacker prospect. They received his commitment earlier this week, and he, even though he doesn't have the best recruiting ranking, he's a 3-star, number 56 linebacker in the country. He's outside of the top 500 players nationally. Notre Dame has done really well recruiting out of Hawaii, especially from Punahou High School, and Kia's dad is actually the head coach there. His older brother, Kahanu Kia, just returned to Notre Dame after his 2-year mission trip. So it's good that they've got 1. I think they need to add 1 or 2 more because outside of Kingston Viliamu-Asa last year, I didn't love the haul. Now, thank God they got KVA because he might be one of the best linebackers to commit to Notre Dame since Jalen Smith. He's an absolute stud. I think that was the most surprising get of the cycle in 2024, and it's great that they got him on board. It sort of saved that position because other than that, they added 2 projects, so to speak, and 3-star Bodie Cajon and 3-star Teddy Rizak out of Nebraska. Neither of those guys were in the top 450 players nationally, and I think Notre Dame saw those guys as developmental pieces. I saw I can't remember it. I'm sorry if I'm not going to be able to credit this correctly, but I believe it was a writer. No, I believe it was Tom Loy with 24/7 Sports talked to one of the coaches on the staff anonymously, and they compared Bodie Cajon to J.D. Bertrand. If it works out like J.D. Bertrand, that's great. But J.D. Bertrand's, those sort of development stories, they don't come around that often. If it ends up being the case, great. And then you have a guy like Kingston Viliamu-Asa who could start at Notre Dame right away. And odds are he's not going to be around Notre Dame for longer than 3 years because he's got everything you want in a pro linebacker because he can cover, he's got the size, he's got the frame to rush the passer. He's got everything you want. So this cycle, if Notre Dame could get another player like KVA, they'd be in really great shape going forward. They've got guys like Drake Bowen. They've got Jay Nosbury on the team too, both young linebackers who are probably going to make their mark starting this season. So the linebacker position as a whole is looking pretty good for the future, but that doesn't mean that Notre Dame can't continue to add, and they're actually going to have a top linebacker on the board, Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, who's actually the younger brother of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He's going to be on campus at Junior Day. Now, even though his older brother is one of the best players to come through Notre Dame in recent memory, Notre Dame's got a long way to go with him. It's great that he's coming to campus on Junior Day We all know how good his brother was. If they're able to land him, he would not only be the best linebacker in the class, he'd be one of the best players overall. So Notre Dame could make a big move this weekend having him around. They're also in the running for four-star Christian Jones and four-star Noah McHale. Notre Dame likes to cast a pretty wide net at linebacker. They did it last year, and they're doing it again this year, so they have a bunch of different options, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out because Ko'Kia is great. He's physical. He's sort of like that old-school linebacker, very physical, loves contact, like so many of the other players Notre Dame has recruited out of Hawaii, but even though I don't have this position as a top priority, it's going to be really interesting to see how Notre Dame finishes this class. Are they going to take another project? Are they going to try to do the Teddy Rizak route that they did last year? Or are they going to be able to land one of these top prospects? If they're able to do that, I will feel very good about the linebacker position going forward. All right, we have one more position left, and even though it's a very important position and not necessarily the biggest priority for Notre Dame, this might end up being the strength of the entire recruiting class that's coming up next. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The NFL season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, including live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular plays, and more. My pick this week, I went against them last week. I'm riding with the Texans. Right now, they're plus 9.5 going against the 1-seed Ravens in the divisional round. And last week, I rode the Browns minus 2.5. I told you all week, I'm going with the Brownies. And guess what? The Texans absolutely smacked the Browns. So this week, I'm going to go with the Texans. C.J. Stroud has been playing out of his mind lately. And I don't think they're going to beat the Ravens, but I think they're going to hang tough. And I think they're going to cover that 9.5-point spread. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Okay, coming in at number 5 on my biggest needs for Notre Dame in the class of 2025 on defense, I have the one position that we have not talked about on defense, and that is cornerback. As long as Mike Mickens is the cornerback coach at Notre Dame, I'm not going to worry about this position. I think that what Mickens has done in his time at Notre Dame has proven to all of us that the guy probably knows a little bit about what he's doing at the position, not just as a developer of talent, but just having an eye for recruiting. When Benjamin Morrison signed to Notre Dame, he was not even in the top 300 players nationally. And then he started playing really in week 1 against Ohio State, and he finished that season as a freshman All-American. The guy can spot talent anywhere in the country, and he can get them on board. Now, last year, Notre Dame added Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs, who were not necessarily the highest-rated guys. But again, I'm not really worried about that. He did add Christian Gray in the cycle before that. And Christian Gray is just so physically gifted. I am so excited about his future at Notre Dame. Right now, Notre Dame only has one commit at cornerback in the class, and that is 3-star Creed Thomas, whose recruiting profile is more aligned with Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. But Notre Dame is in the running for 3 just studs at cornerback. The most notable, at least to me, is 4-star Dallas Golden out of Florida. Brian Smith and I talked about Dallas Golden earlier this week when he came on the show, and he was like, this dude is the one. He went to the same high school, or he goes to the same high school as Keon Keeley, and this dude is the real deal. He can play literally every position. If you watch his junior film, he does play every single position. He's actually listed on the recruiting sites as a safety, but Notre Dame projects him to play cornerback. But this guy legitimately could play both ways in college. He's that much of an athlete, and he's so good with the ball in his hands. Like, this dude is just a football player. Wherever he plays at the next level, he is going to be extremely successful. He is going to be on campus this weekend for Junior Day, as well as 4-star corner Devin Williams and 4-star Mark Zachary IV. If Notre Dame was able to land 2 of those guys, 2 of those 3, the cornerback class would be probably the strength of the entire class of 2025. It is that good, and I think that highly of Dallas Golden. Notre Dame doesn't necessarily need it as much because they've got Christian Gray, who's going to be a true sophomore. They've got Jaden Mickey, who's going to be entering his junior season next year. So they've got young guys. Even though Mickey's a junior, he hasn't really played all that much at Notre Dame. Certainly not as a starter, but he's played more as a reserve. And then they added Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. So there's young talent at the position. But still, when you can add guys like this, you know, I've talked about Dallas Golden. Devin Williams is the number 12 cornerback in the class. Mark Zachary, he's the number 168 player in the entire country, and he's the 3rd of these corners that Notre Dame is having on campus this weekend, he's the third lowest ranked of the three. Like, that's the type of company that Notre Dame is in, and it's honestly pretty foreign land considering what Notre Dame had recruited at cornerback in the years prior. Like, prior to Mike Mickens, every single year felt like we were talking about, can Notre Dame's corners just hang on? Like, Julian Love was the obvious exception. He should have won the Thorpe Award. He was great. Most of the other cornerbacks that Notre Dame had weren't really that great, especially the ones that Notre Dame was getting in the on the recruiting trail. Like, Kavari Russell was great, but he was a running back coming out of high school. So his developmental story was similar to Xavier Watts, but those don't happen all that often. So if Notre Dame is able to land two more of these guys, I feel great about that position, and that is why I have corner at number 5. It's just not as high of a priority because of what Mike Mickens has been doing over the course of the past several years. Every year he's just recruiting really talented guys. He develops them into great players, and they're going to move on to the NFL. Like, look at Cam Hart's development under Mike Mickens. It was great, and if he didn't have the injury history that he did, he could be a second-round draft pick in the NFL. Benjamin Morrison, just an unbelievable corner. He could be a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft. So as long as Mike Mickens is there, man, I'm not going to worry about it, and that's why I got him at number 5. So in review, for my biggest needs for Notre Dame on defense in the class of 2025, number 1, I've got defensive end. I think they need just one more. Shanklin would certainly fit that mold. And number 2, I've got safety. And number 3, I've got defensive tackle. And number 4, I've got linebacker. And at number 5, I have cornerback. And that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. We'll be back here tomorrow with another mailbag episode, so get your questions in. You can drop them in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube, or you can send them to me on X at Locked On Irish, or slide in the Instagram DMs at Locked On Irish Pod. Lastly, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you guys tomorrow.